Greg Phillips from Australian Musician. Today I'm at the Fender Sydney headquarters and I'm thrilled to be with Andy Mooney, the CEO of Fender Musical Instruments. Andy, how are you?
Very good. My pleasure to be here.
You're in town for a couple of days. What do you hope to get out of a short trip like this?
Well, coming into any of the countries that we do business on the ground in, mostly what I'm doing is either coaching or learning, or a little bit of both. So learned a lot today and last night, and want to provide some insights for the group, but also learn what challenges and opportunities they have in the local country.
Yeah. I know that in your younger days you were in bands, one particular one called Bitch, obviously a string quartet.
Yeah, not quite.
Obviously you would have had a local store or stores where you get your strings and picks and guitars and things. Yeah. What experiences from those days stick in your mind that come in use today?
Well, the store that I used to frequent was in Glasgow. It was a store called McCormick's. It's actually, unfortunately, no longer in business anymore. But I always remember going in there and just ogling at the guitars that were on the wall, which, given I kind of grew up in a relatively low-income family, most of them, the guitars that were on the wall, were ones I couldn't afford. But I love to go in there every day.
Yeah. Before Fender, you were working for Nike and Disney. You were, all that time, still a guitar enthusiast, guitar collector. Tell me a little bit about your collection. What are your favourite pieces?
Well, at the point when I moved from the UK to the US, I was in my late 20s then, and I kind of figured out I was not going to make it as a professional musician. So I actually sold all of my gear. Wish I hadn't now. There was some pieces that would be vintage pieces now. And I concentrated on my career at Nike, but about 2 years after I lived in the US, I bumped into an old friend, Alan Rogan, who's a guitar technician for Pete Townsend, who unfortunately passed this year. He gave me a book then, over a long time ago now, so 86, that was the history of the Bacon and Day book, the history of the Fender Company. And I fell in love with the brand again. And I decided, somewhat whimsically, to collect every guitar that was photographed in the book. So that's been a 30-year labor of love. My two prize editions from that book were 55 Stratocaster, 52 Telecaster, both of which I'm glad I bought decades ago. It's become very much more expensive now. I love those guitars, and now they're a little piece of history, and they hang on the wall in my office or in the hallway adjoining my office, and they're there along with another 60 guitars that are in my collection for anybody to play at any time they feel like it.
Music is ever changing. There was a time where everybody knew of a guitar hero. There was Jimmy Page's, Eric Clapton's, into the Satriani's, Vais, Van Halen's. Not so much today. You'd probably struggle to hear a guitar solo on the radio. Not that radio was that important anymore. But the mainstream media have sort of taken that to equate that to the guitar is dead, which is very much not the case. It's just being used differently.
Absolutely.
Guitar these days is used to texture and colour. Music used in different ways. I'm wondering what kind of discussions happen around the Fender boardroom in regard to the change of music.
Well, before I answer the question, I'll give you my little kind of historical context in that, which is the first time I heard the death of the electric guitar proclaimed. I think John Travolta was dancing in Saturday Night Live, and disco was going to kill the electric guitar. Most recently, it's been EDM. But you're absolutely right. The era of the guitar god driving the industry actually ended in the 70s with the emergence of punk. And to be honest, although many of them are my personal heroes, they were all virtuosos and they were very difficult to emulate. Along came punk, and if you had enthusiasm, you could play 3 chords and you had a pulse, you could be in the music business. And that really started the beginning of the change the way that guitar is used, exactly as you describe it. It's a compositional instrument, it's a performance instrument. It's less about mastering the techniques and the skills, although there are still a great many players, a lot of them in the heavy metal genre, where the guitar god still exists. And I think we actually have been successful in changing the narrative now. And in fact, in some ways, even introducing new elements of the narrative. For example, the importance of female artists, female guitar players, both as first-time players, but increasingly now, female artists who are headliners, like Tash Totana here in Australia.
Yeah. How much of what Fender does is proactive, and how much is reactive? How much do you take notice of what's happening in the charts and the live scene, your competitors, and react to that, and how much is just going about your business and sticking to your own plan?
Well, I'd say we're very proactive on two fronts. I would argue that we've probably been more proactive in the last few years than maybe ever in our history. One is, the good news is there are really powerful external factors that are helping grow the industry. So the growth of interest in recording music through streaming, 255 million people paying for a streaming music service last year. Goldman Sachs are saying that's going to go to 700 million in 3 years and over $1 billion by 2030. Growth in consumption of live music. In Live Nation, 93 million people attended a Live Nation concert, up from 83 million. So this deep and broad interest in music generally is helping fuel sales of musical instruments and the music business. The proactive part that we've been most focused on over the last few years, one is picking up the pace of product innovation. We have kind of reduced the life cycle of our product. We're evolving them more purposely, and I think we're innovating on multiple fronts. We're spending a lot more on marketing than we ever did. We've kind of changed it from 4% of our revenues to 10% next year, and changed the way that we spend the money from largely trade advertising to consumer advertising through social media. So we're telling more players, hey, go to your local music store or your local music store's website to try this new thing. And that's driving higher conversion and higher turnover in the store. So our dealers are pretty happy right now. We're pretty happy because we got external trends helping us, and a lot of the things that we're doing are actually driving increased interest in the category overall.
When I interview guitar players, often I ask them how they learn to play guitar. And a lot of them are self-taught, depending on what era they're from. It could be music lessons, videos, DVDs. Then you had the YouTube generation. I'm wondering how long it'll be before the wave of artists comes along that say they learnt from Fender Play.
Well, I think it's happening already. I learned to play in primary school, classical guitar, nylon string classical guitar, and my very first electric guitar was a Fender Music Master, way back. As of this morning, I just checked the data this morning on my computer. We have 108,000 paying users in Fender Play. That product has been available for a couple of years, so it's maybe a little too early for the first artist to actually come out of Fender Play. But before we embarked upon creating the product, the data that we looked at suggested that, as in most things in life right now, the trend in learning was towards online learning, where consumers can learn at the pace they like, in the place they like, and in the manner in which they like. So I think all of that's really been incorporated in the Fender Play, and we're really happy with the result of it so far. One of the other interesting things we learned about it was that we thought it would all be young players, perhaps picking up the instrument for the first time. That turned out to be only about half of the audience. The other half are people whose kids have gone to college who are either picking up the instrument for the second time or picking it up for the first time because now they have the time to devote to learning an instrument and they have the money to spend to buy a high quality instrument. And that was a little bit of a surprise, very pleasant surprise to us. So we're catering to really two significant demographics with Fender Play now.
With technology, or for the younger people, technology, they grow up with it, it's part of their life. The older customers take a bit longer to get used to technology. Are you seeing a widening in the younger and older customers' needs?
Well, I think it varies quite a bit by product subset within our industry. In the case of guitars, almost any technology overlay on a guitar itself has been soundly rejected by consumers. And even in products like effects pedals, you know, the rash of digital effects pedals that came, say as long as 10 years ago, have been superseded by demand for a stomp box that does one thing but does one thing really, really well. So I think in some categories technology is not really working for consumers, but in other categories, in amps, I think it's starting to work, you know, increasingly. So, you know, our best-selling line of guitar and bass amps, the Mustang series, the Rumble series, have a companion app that goes with them, Fender Tone, that allows you to manage your presets, that allows you to stream Bluetooth onto your amp that you can play along with it. I think kids these days, they kind of expect that type of technology to be built into the products that they use, and they find it very intuitive in terms of how they work with it. Whereas, you know, older consumers may well be, I love my tube amp. I don't think that can be improved upon, and that's what I'm going to stick with. And that's okay too. We want to cater to both those customers.
Yeah. Yeah, the vintage second-hand market is still huge and something you have no control over, really.
Right.
But it still does have a part to play in the jigsaw, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely, especially I think for people who are coming into the market for the first time. One of the things that always surprised me as a consumer being on the outside of the market is, you know, the first American Standard that I bought was, I think, from 1986. We had gone through 7 evolutions of the American Standard, but had never changed the name. So one of the things that I kind of insisted upon when I joined the company is I said, if we're going to evolve the American Standard, we have to change the name. And there was a heated debate within the company about whether that was wise because it had so much equity. I mean, going all the way back to '86. My point of view was we need to signal to folks who are buying on eBay that the American Standard is the old version of that model and the American Professional is the new version of the model. And it's okay if you want to buy either or, but we need to kind of clearly distinguish the eras of the guitar through the name, because otherwise sometimes it can be difficult. It can be difficult to distinguish the old from the new. But I think we've successfully created some space, I think, between old renditions of models, which some people love, and the newer renditions.
The Acoustasonic Tele has been a great success for you. Tell me about the first time that idea was put to you.
Well, I put the idea to the team. It was the other way around. One of the beliefs I took from Nike and into Disney was that great brands are the cumulative effects of great products. And when I joined Disney, one of the first people I came across was Steve Jobs, who was CEO of Pixar at the time, and Apple. And he asked me my point of view on, well, what do you think makes a great brand? And I told him. And he goes, well, I agree with that. He said, but with one caveat. He said, I feel that every single product a brand makes is either a deposit or a withdrawal in the bank of brand equity. So when I joined the company, I looked at everything that we'd done for almost 70 years in electric guitars and amps, and every single product was a deposit in the bank of brand equity. But there were things that we could do, I believed, in the acoustic category and the pedal category, because in both cases we were not getting widespread adoption by working musicians. So the brief to the team back almost 4 years ago was incredibly simple but very, very difficult to execute. The brief was design a guitar, an electrified acoustic guitar for working musicians the way that Leo Fender would have designed it. Because Leo would have designed it with a design thesis of form following function. He would have used technology if it made life easier for the working musician, as opposed to more complicated. He would have made it serviceable on the road. It would have sounded great. The controls on it would have been accessible on stage. Oh, and by the way, we have to be able to make it in Corona, California, and we have to be able to retail it for $2,000 or less. So I watched the progress of that guitar over 3 years with labor love for myself and the team. And I watched them come in every 90 days or so and go, okay, well, here's one part of your brief. We managed it. Check, 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 check. So right up until 6 months before the product was launched, because I had listened to the development of the sound of the model from both because the sound comes from melding of traditional luthier skills with sophisticated audio modeling that we worked in collaboration with Fishman Electronics. I had heard these sounds evolve, and now I was hearing multiple great sounding acoustic voices. I hear the final prototype, and I heard everything that I'd heard before, but refined even more, and I was perfectly happy and was ready to get up off my chair to leave, and they said, no, sit, just stay, just one more minute. And then these electric sounds were produced from the guitar, and I was like, oh my God, that wasn't even in the brief. This is like a huge surprise. Now we have something that I didn't even contemplate. We have a great electrified acoustic guitar with multiple voices, and we have an electric guitar that you can play through pedals on stage. This has never been done before. So I was thrilled with it. I had pretty high expectations for it, but we've sold about 3 times as many as we anticipated. And we now see it as essentially not just a product, but a platform upon which we can have a myriad of models, a myriad of voices, and over time, even a variation in price points and countries of origin. So I couldn't be more happy with how that product turned out, and I'm kind of really excited about what we can do with it in the future.
You mentioned pedals. I just wondered what's happening in the future with pedals. You've got some great people there like Stan Cote working on them. What's the plan without giving away too much, I suppose?
No, I mean, it was another, going back to that conversation with Steve Jobs, it was another category that was really important to working musicians. Because as you mentioned earlier, I thought it was a very good description, is that contemporary musicians want a very high quality, very reliable instrument on stage. They want a small amp that's portable, that can be mic'd up or carried around. We had those. But they're creating their unique sound through a combination of how they play the guitar and what pedals they're putting it through. And younger players these days, I've seen boards with 20, 30 pedals on. And we were not really we hadn't really taken that product category seriously. So that was another big initiative that I kind of discussed with the team. We turned Stan's attention on it, and he truly is a mad scientist. And then we shared those pedals with both artists and with the most intense critics that we could find. And when we started to get the thumbs up, that's when we felt we were ready to go to market. So we're committed to this category for the long run. You'll see us every 6 months introduce two or three new pedals. I'm pretty excited about the next wave that we have coming up. Let's just say I think there's things that we can do in, let's say, the wah-wah category that might surprise people, so stay tuned.
1950, Leo Fender gave us the first solid body guitar, an Esquire. The year 2020 is the 70th anniversary. Surely you're going to acknowledge that in some way?
We certainly are, and the custom shop is brewing, cooking up their kind of special brew right now, and you will definitely see the re-emergence of the Broadcaster. We have a great relationship with the Gretsch family because we actually manage their brand in the guitar space, and we will be reintroducing the Broadcaster with the original Broadcaster name, so I'm pretty excited about that.
I'm excited about that too. Retailers are a big part of music and selling musical instruments. Bricks and mortar stores are doing it tough. If you haven't got a good online presence, you're in trouble. Your relationship with bricks and mortar retail going forward and advice for them?
Yes, so the way that we kind of even segment our account base or talk about our account base internally, there's pure play retailers, many of who are growing by leaps and bounds, Sweetwater in the US, Thomann in Europe. But increasingly, the hybrid retail, we call them hybrid retailers, really omni-channel retailers who have a very solid physical presence, but also have a distinct voice online. They're also thriving too. It's only really dealers who have no presence whatsoever that are finding it tough. The ones who are finding, ones who are walking and chewing gum at the same time are actually doing really, really quite well right now. In the geographies where we even have Fender.com, when we initially introduced Fender.com, retailers were some were angry, others were concerned. In the US, where we've had Fender.com for the longest time, five plus years now, Fender.com represents about 3% of our total revenues in the region. And we increasingly use Fender.com to point consumers in the direction of the stores where they can physically find the product, because at the end of the day, I always believe that guitar players would prefer to touch, feel, hear, experience the guitar rather than take the gamble of buying it online. So I think brick and mortar retailers, or more so brick and mortar retailers with a distinct tone of voice and a commitment to online support, online retailing, I think will thrive. I'm sure they will thrive.
What are you most excited about with the future of Fender?
Well, I'm equally excited, I would say, about two things. I mean, one is the success of the Acoustasonic this year, I think really will serve us well for many years, in that the acoustic guitar category is actually larger than the electric guitar category. I don't think it's inconceivable that over the long run we'll get the same type of market share in acoustic guitars as we have in electric guitars if we do the job as well in acoustics as we've done in electric. So I think there's a tremendous runway of growth in our core hardware business. But I'm equally excited about both the potential as a business for a digital business, but even more so the synergies back and forth between our hardware business and our software business. Because it's abundantly clear now that Fender Play is both bringing new players into the market who otherwise might not even have thought about playing electric guitar or guitar, and it's causing them to engage with the instrument longer. And the longer that first-time players in particular engage with the instrument, the more likely they are to commit to the instrument for life. If you commit to the instrument for life, on average, you're going to spend $10,000. You're going to buy 5 to 7 guitars in your lifetime. You're going to experiment with multiple amps. You're going to buy a lot of accessories. And you and your friends, men and women now, are going to drive future growth in the EMI industry. So I'm hugely excited about the way that both of these things are working together, because it's almost everybody who's in this industry loves this industry. It's a passion as well as a profession. So the more I think that we can do to kind of create growth in an industry that everybody loves, then the happier I'll be.
Andy Mooney, thanks for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.